building super slipped a note under my door at 2 in the morning, and I almost didn't see it. I've been sleeping badly since I arrived at my son's place. That's how it was those first few nights. I'd wake up around 1, lie there staring at the ceiling, listening to the city outside. 43 years in Dayton, Ohio, and now I was here in downtown Chicago, on the 14th floor of a building that cost more per month than I used to make in 6. My son's building. My son's place. He'd told me to think of it as home. I didn't. The note was folded in half, slid far enough under the door that I nearly stepped on it when I got up for water. I picked it up without thinking much. Probably a building notice, I figured. Some announcement about the elevator or the parking garage. It wasn't. Mr. Aldrich, I need to speak with you before 8 a.m. Please come to the service entrance on the ground floor. Don't mention this to your son or his wife. It's important. Felix Ortega, building superintendent. I read it twice. Then I read it a third time. I set it on the kitchen counter and stood there in the dark for a long moment. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a siren wailed past and faded. I folded the note carefully and slid it into the pocket of my robe. I didn't sleep after that. Let me back up a little, because none of this makes sense without the full picture. My name is Howard Aldrich. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a high school history teacher in Dayton department chair for the last 9 of those. My wife, Carolyn, taught 3rd grade at the elementary school 2 blocks away. We had one son together, a boy named Bryce, born in 1991. We raised him in the same house where I still live, a 4-bedroom colonial on Elmwood Drive with a maple tree in the backyard that Carolyn planted the spring after we moved in. Carolyn died 14 months ago. Pancreatic cancer. It moved fast. She was diagnosed in February and gone by July. I won't spend much time on that part because it still doesn't feel real to me, even now. Some mornings, I still reach for my phone to call her before I remember. Bryce flew home for the funeral, of course. He lives in Chicago now, has for the past 6 years. He works in finance, some kind of investment management firm where I've never fully understood what he actually does, only that he makes a great deal of money doing it. He married a woman named Sienna 3 years ago. She's pretty in a calculated sort of way, always dressed like she's about to be photographed, always saying the right things with her face slightly ahead of her words. I tried to like her. I still try. After Carolyn's funeral, Bryce sat across from me at the kitchen table and told me he was worried, said I seemed lost, said the house was too big for one person and that maybe I should think about a change of scenery. I told him I appreciated the concern and that I'd be fine. He nodded like he didn't believe me. I was fine. Mostly, the house was quiet in ways I hadn't expected, but I had my routines. The library on Tuesdays, the veterans coffee group on Thursday mornings, the neighbor's dog I walked on weekends because she traveled for work. I was managing. Then in March, Bryce called to tell me he and Sienna had purchased a penthouse unit in their building, the unit directly above theirs. He said they wanted me to come stay for a while, get out of Dayton, see something different. He said it with such warmth that I felt guilty for the hesitation I felt. I went. Of course I went. He's my son. I arrived on a Thursday. Bryce picked me up from Union Station himself, which surprised me. I'd expected a car service. He looked good, tanned, well-dressed, the kind of effortless put together that comes from having someone else manage the details of your life. He hugged me at the platform and held on for a moment longer than usual, and I thought, okay, this will be fine. The building was impressive in the way that expensive things often are. All glass and brushed steel in the lobby, a concierge desk, a man in a suit who nodded at Bryce by name. We rode the elevator to the 14th floor, which Bryce explained was technically the penthouse level, though the building goes to 16. He said it like it mattered. The unit was beautiful. I won't pretend otherwise. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a kitchen with appliances I didn't recognize, a guest bedroom with a mattress that probably cost more than my first car. Sienna was there when we arrived, wearing something white and effortless, and she kissed my cheek and told me it was wonderful to have me. "We want you to feel completely at home," she said. I thanked her and meant it. The strangeness started small. By the second day, I noticed I was tired in a way that didn't match how I'd slept. I'd gotten maybe 6 hours, not great, but not bad. And yet by noon, I felt like I was moving through water. I chalked it up to the travel, the change in altitude, the unfamiliar sounds of the city. On the third morning, Sienna made coffee. She had one of those elaborate machines with the chrome arms and the pressurized portafilter, and she made mine without asking how I took it. Black, which happened to be correct, though I hadn't told her. She handed me the mug and smiled, and I drank it while she told me about a restaurant she wanted to take me to that weekend. By afternoon, I had a headache that sat right behind my eyes and didn't move. By evening, I felt nauseated. I went to bed early and Bryce asked if I was all right, and I said yes, just tired, probably still adjusting. The fourth morning, it happened again. The coffee tasted different than I expected, slightly off, metallic at the back of the throat, the kind of taste that makes you check the mug. I checked it. It looked fine. I drank it anyway because I didn't want to seem ungrateful. By midday, I was so foggy I couldn't read. I sat by the window and watched the city and tried to think clearly and couldn't. I kept losing the thread of things. That night, I lay awake and thought about the coffee. Thought about how Sienna always brought it to me. How she always seemed to be in the kitchen slightly ahead of me in the mornings, already at the machine, already pouring. How I never saw her drink from the same pot. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself grief does strange things to the mind. I told myself I was a 67-year-old widower sleeping in an unfamiliar city and my brain was simply not cooperating. I almost convinced myself. Then the note arrived. At 7:45 in the morning, I took the elevator to the lobby and told the concierge I was going for a walk. He smiled and held the door. I found the service entrance around the side of the building, a heavy steel door propped open with a rubber wedge. Felix Ortega was waiting just inside, standing next to a utility cart loaded with cleaning supplies. He was a compact man, maybe 55, with gray at his temples and the kind of steady eyes that don't look away when they're talking to you. "Mr. Aldrich," he said, "thank you for coming." "Your note said important," I said. I tend to take that word seriously. He glanced toward the door, then back at me. "How long have you been staying up there?" "5 days." He nodded slowly. "How do you feel?" Something in his tone made me careful. "Why do you ask?" "Because I need to know if what I'm going to tell you is going to land on a clear head." He said it without any apology, just matter of fact, like a doctor assessing before he delivers results. "Clear enough," I said. He reached into the front pocket of his work shirt and pulled out a folded piece of paper, not a note this time, a printout. He handed it to me, and I unfolded it. It was a photograph, printed in black and white. Security camera footage, it looked like, time-stamped from 4 days ago, 6:43 in the morning. The kitchen of the unit upstairs. Sienna standing at the counter with her back to the camera, but her hands were visible. She was opening a small amber bottle, the kind pharmacies use, and tipping something into a coffee mug. My coffee mug. I recognized the blue ceramic handle. Carolyn had given me that mug. I stood there and I didn't say anything for a long time. "The cameras in the units are disabled," Felix said quietly. "Building policy, privacy. But the hallway cameras pick up through the kitchen window if the blinds are open at that angle." She didn't know. He paused. I almost didn't see it myself. I was reviewing footage from a noise complaint on 13 and I happened to notice. "What is it?" I asked. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "What's she putting in it?" "I don't know," he said. "I'm not a doctor, but I've been doing this job for 22 years and I know what someone looks like when they don't want to be seen." I looked at the photograph again. Then I folded it and put it in my jacket pocket. "Why didn't you call the police?" I asked. "I thought about it," he said, "but I didn't have enough. Just one image, no audio, no way to identify the substance, and I thought you deserved to know first." He looked at me directly. "You're his father." I thanked him. I didn't know what else to say. I took the elevator back upstairs. Bryce was at work. Sienna was on a call in the second bedroom. Door closed, her voice low and professional on the other side. I stood in the kitchen and looked at the coffee machine and thought about what to do. I didn't make coffee. I filled the glass from the tap and drank it standing at the window, looking out at the lake in the distance, gray-green in the morning light. I thought about my son, about the boy who used to fall asleep on the couch during baseball games, who cried at his mother's funeral in a way that made me look away because it was too much to hold. I thought about whether that boy and this man were the same person, and I found I couldn't answer. I thought about the penthouse, about the timing, the invitation coming 14 months after Carolyn died, about what Bryce stood to inherit when I was gone, about the life insurance policy, the house on Elmwood Drive, the retirement accounts I'd spent 31 years building on a teacher's salary. Not a fortune by any measure, but enough. I thought about what Sienna was putting in my coffee and why, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. I had to know more before I could do anything. If I called the police with a photograph and a theory, I'd have nothing. I needed to understand what I was actually dealing with. So I did the only thing that made sense. I stayed. I stopped drinking the coffee. I poured it down the sink when Sienna wasn't watching and pretended to sip from the mug. I told her I'd been cutting back on caffeine, doctor's orders. I said, vague enough that she didn't push. She smiled and said that was probably smart. I kept my phone charged and within reach at all times. I called my doctor in Dayton, Dr. Waverly, who'd been treating me for 20 years, and described my symptoms without explaining the full situation. He asked about my medications, my sleep, my diet. I told him I'd been having coffee made by someone else. He paused and said that some people are sensitive to additives in flavored coffee and asked if I'd been drinking a flavored blend. I said I didn't think so. He said to stick to plain water for a few days and see if I improved. I improved. By the fourth day of not drinking the coffee, the fog lifted noticeably. I woke up clear. I could read without losing my place. I could follow a conversation without my attention sliding sideways. That scared me more than the fog had. Meanwhile, I started paying attention to the conversations happening around me. Bryce and Sienna didn't argue in front of me. They were careful about that. But the apartment was not as large as it seemed, and they forgot, I think, that old teachers develop very good hearing over 31 years of listening for trouble in the back row. I heard them at night, voices low in the kitchen while they thought I was asleep. "He seems better," Sienna said once. "It takes time," Bryce answered. "We don't have unlimited time, Bryce." A pause. "I know that." I lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and thought, unlimited time for what? On the 8th day of my stay, while Bryce was at work and Sienna was at the gym, I looked through the apartment. I'm not proud of it, but I did it. I moved carefully through the rooms, not disturbing anything, just looking. In the second bedroom, the one Sienna used as an office, I found a manila folder in the top desk drawer. Inside was a document I recognized. It was my financial power of attorney paperwork. Carolyn and I had drawn it up years ago as part of our estate planning, standard documents naming Bryce as my agent in the event of incapacitation. That was normal. What wasn't normal was that the document had been altered, not crudely, professionally, the kind of change you might miss if you weren't looking carefully. The language around incapacitation had been modified, loosened, in a way that would make it much easier to invoke. I photographed every page with my phone. Then I put the folder back, exactly as I'd found it, and walked out to the living room and sat down and looked at the lake. My son. My boy. My one child. I thought about calling someone. I thought about getting up and walking out of the building with my suitcase and driving back to Dayton and never coming back. I thought about what Carolyn would have said, what she would have told me to do. She would have said, "Get the whole truth before you move." So I did. I called my attorney, a woman named Beverly Opes, who'd handled our estate documents for 15 years. I told her I was concerned the POA documents might have been tampered with. I told her I had photographs. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, very carefully, "Howard, do not sign anything while you're there. And don't let them know you've seen those documents." "I wasn't planning to," I said. "I'm going to make some calls," she said. "Give me 2 days." I gave her 2 days. In the meantime, I continued performing the role of a tired old man on a pleasant visit. I ate dinner with my son and his wife every evening. I complimented Sienna's cooking. She was, genuinely, a very good cook, which made the whole thing more surreal. I asked Bryce about his work and listened to his answers and tried to find in his face some trace of the boy I remembered. There were traces. That was the hardest part. He laughed at the right moments. He refilled my water glass without being asked. One evening, he put on a baseball game, and we watched together without talking, the way we used to. And for about 20 minutes, I almost forgot why I was there. Almost. On the third evening, something shifted. Bryce came home later than usual, tighter around the eyes, and Sienna met him at the door with a look I couldn't read. After dinner, while I was pretending to read in the living room, I heard them in the kitchen. "The attorney called back," Sienna said. "Which one?" "Beverly Oaks." The View. "She's asking about the POA documents. Said she had some questions about the amendment." A silence. "He must have said something," Bryce said. "Or she's just thorough." "No," Bryce said. "He said something." I turned a page of my book and kept my breathing even. "What do we do?" Sienna asked. "We move faster," Bryce said quietly. "I'll talk to him tomorrow." I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, Bryce sat across from me at the kitchen table. No coffee, I'd made sure of that. I'd offered to go get pastries from the place on the corner and suggested he make his own while I was gone, and he had a folder of papers in front of him. "Dad," he said, "I want to talk to you about some financial planning." "All right," I said. "With Mom gone and you being on your own, I've been thinking about how to protect your assets, make sure everything's in order." He opened the folder. I had my attorney draw up a few documents. It would just give me the ability to manage things on your behalf. The house, the accounts, everything. Keep it simple for you. I looked at the documents. Then I looked at my son. "Bryce," I said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. When did you buy this penthouse?" He blinked. "About 4 months ago." "Why?" "4 months ago," I said. "Your mother's been gone 14 months. You bought a second unit 4 months ago." I kept my voice level. That's a considerable investment for someone who's been saying for years that the real estate market is overpriced. Something moved across his face. It was a good opportunity. I'm sure it was. I folded my hands on the table. "I'm not going to sign anything today, Bryce." A pause. "Dad, I'm going to fly home tomorrow," I said. "I'm going to have Beverly look at these documents. If everything is as straightforward as you say, we can handle it properly, with both attorneys present." I stood up. "That's how your mother and I always handled things. Properly." He sat there. He didn't say anything. Sienna appeared in the doorway behind him, and I watched something pass between them. Not words, just a look. And I understood then the full weight of what I was in the middle of. "I think I'll go pack," I said. I had my bag in the elevator when Felix appeared in the lobby. He saw me and his face changed. Relief, I think, or something close to it. "You're leaving," he said. "I am." He glanced toward the concierge desk, then leaned slightly closer. "I sent the footage to my nephew," he said quietly. "He's a detective with CPD. He said if you want to file a complaint, you have grounds." The substance in the footage. She ordered it online. He traced it. He paused. "It's a sedative. Prescription grade, not prescribed to you or to her." I stood in the lobby of that glass and steel building and felt the floor hold steady beneath me. That was the only thing I was sure of right then. The floor was solid. "Thank you, Felix," I said. He nodded. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Aldrich." Beverly Oaks filed a complaint with the Illinois Attorney General's office 9 days after I returned to Dayton. The amended POA document was found to contain fraudulent modifications. The original notary seal had been reproduced digitally, which is a felony in Illinois. CPD opened an investigation, and the detective Felix had contacted a young man named Marco Reyes, as it turned out, was already building a file. Bryce called me twice the week the investigation started. The first call I didn't answer. The second call I did. "Dad," he said, "I need to explain." "You don't," I said. "I know what happened. I know most of it." A long silence. "It was Sienna's idea," he said finally. I thought about the look they'd exchanged in the kitchen, the way she'd met him at the door that evening, the way he'd said we move faster without a moment's hesitation. "Bryce," I said, "I taught history for 31 years. You know what I told my students every September?" I waited. He didn't answer. I told them, "Always read the primary sources. Don't take someone else's word for what happened. Go back to the original." I paused. "Your mother and I were the originals. Whatever Sienna told you about what you deserved, what you were owed, that wasn't primary source material." Another silence. Then he said, very quietly, "I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't know if he meant it. I don't know now. Get a good attorney," I said, "and get away from her." I hung up. The charges came down in late June. Sienna was charged with unlawful administration of a controlled substance, elder financial abuse, and document fraud. Bryce was charged as a co-conspirator on the financial fraud counts. His attorney negotiated a plea. He cooperated, provided documentation, testified about the scheme. The sentence was significantly reduced. He'll carry a record for the rest of his life. I sat in my kitchen on Elmwood Drive the evening the plea was finalized and looked out at the backyard. The maple Carolyn planted is tall now, taller than the fence, taller than the garage roof. It was raining lately, and the leaves were dark and moving in the wind. I'd spent 31 years teaching other people's children how to think, how to read a situation clearly, how to weigh evidence, how to resist the version of events that felt easiest to believe. I almost failed my own exam. I think about Felix Ortega sometimes, a building superintendent in Chicago who didn't have to do anything, who could have looked the other way, told himself it wasn't his business, that he was reading too much into a shadow on a security monitor at 6:43 in the morning. He wrote a note instead, slipped it under the door, trusted me to handle what came next. I owe that man more than I know how to say. My daughter-in-law will likely serve 18 months, possibly less. My son will be on probation for 2 years. I still haven't decided what our relationship will look like after that. Some days, I think I can find a way back to him. Some days, I'm less sure. The house on Elmwood Drive is quiet, same as it's been. The library on Tuesdays. The veterans' coffee on Thursdays. The neighbor's dog on weekends. My routines held while everything else shifted, and I'm grateful for that, for the small, steady things that kept me myself through all of it. There's a photograph of Carolyn on the table beside my chair, one of my favorites. She's laughing at something outside the frame, squinting into the sun, one hand up to shade her eyes. I talk to it sometimes. I know that's a thing people do. Last week, I poured myself a cup of coffee, my own coffee, in my own kitchen, out of my own machine, into the blue ceramic mug she gave me. And I sat down in the morning quiet and I drank it. It tasted like it always had, like nothing was wrong, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I sat there for a long time, and I let that be enough.